Thank you. Thank you so much for Globoil, the Globoil organization, for having us again. It's a real pleasure. We're very honored to be here. And we're going, since my colleagues already mentioned production and perspectives for production, I'm going to focus more on prices. Fastmarkets is a price reporting agency. We have more than 160 years, and we have currently more than 1,000 daily prices in several commodities, but I'm going to focus on soy oil here. Okay, so to tell the story of soy oil in 2025, we have to start at destination to talk about the origin. So soy oil prices were more competitive here in India from talking about 2025, from January up until April. Then when we started to have the soybean crop arriving, we had the opposite pressure from U.S. biofuel speculations. So the prices kind of didn't fall as much, but did fall a bit enough for palm to regain competitivity from then on. But then everything changed this week. We saw a lot of trades of soy oil here in India, as I'm going to mention in the following slide. Sun oil was commanding a premium to other oils, but since the next panel is about sun oil, I'm not going to spend much time there. Okay, so to talk about patterns in India imports, because that affects greatly the origins. Soy oil has gained some share over palm in the past year. So we have seen a large growth in production in South America. We're up 8.5%. I'm using USDA numbers here, so they're widely available. But we have seen a larger increase in production for soy than for palm. And in Brazil, we're continuing to see that tendency. CONAB's recent numbers show another increase for 2025-2026 for planting intentions. And although in Argentina, the recent estimates have showed a smaller area. But this tendency of a larger share of soy oil also shows interesting tendency for the origins. So both Argentina and Brazil increased their share in Indian imports this year. So Argentina increased by a larger number, but even Brazil, with biofuel policies, has increased by 1 percentage point its participation in the Indian market. So I'm going to talk a bit about Brazil and Argentina, but because we follow prices on both FOB markets. So Brazil is a big equation on biodiesel. So we started the year thinking that exports would decrease. Abiovi, I'm using Abiovi's projections just to show the movement between the beginning of the year up until now. So Abiovi, the industry body, projected 1.05 million tons in the beginning of the year for Brazil's exports. But then in February, 1 month later, the government announced the expected increase in biodiesel blending was not going to happen. B15 was suspended for now. It was supposed to come in line in March, but then the increase in the blending got suspended. It only occurred around 5 months later, in August 1st. And what happened to Brazilian soy oil? It went to exports. It went mainly to India. So we see from January to August an increase of around 15% in Brazil's soy oil exports. And that has led to a change in projections. So Abiovi is now projecting 1.35 million tons, which is roughly what we exported last year. So even with the increase in the biodiesel blend from August onwards, we're still maintaining the export level. So we have the Fuels of the Future law, which I mentioned last year because it just got approved. But this highly depends. The increase in biodiesel mandates is supposed to happen like 1 percentage point per year, but it highly depends on the government's decision. So it depends on the market conditions, and something like what happened this year, that the biodiesel blend increase got delayed, highly affects how much Brazil can export. For Argentina, my colleagues already mentioned a lot. I'm just going to focus on the price side of things. Started the year reducing export taxes for soybean products. That has led to a higher farmer selling, and especially towards the end of the reduction, which was June 30th. So we see a lot of movement and an increase in soy oil exports as well. And then after returning to the original export taxes in July, the government announced a new reduction, as Agustin has mentioned. And then this week, it eliminated export taxes for a period up to October 31, or until export licenses applications reached an amount equivalent to 7 billion, which has already had today was already announced, and so the government returned to the original scenario. So it's hard to keep an updated presentation on this week because a lot of things are happening. While this happened this past 3 days, we saw a large movement of soy oil sales to India, CFR India. More than 100,000 tons is what we're hearing. It can be even an even higher volume in the past 3 days because prices have fallen both at the origin and at destination. And we saw a high increase in farmer sales. So we saw a very a big potential for new trades. But then today, the market is more muted because, of course, the scenario has changed a bit. Okay, so the last part I wanted to mention, I won't focus too much on it, but is U.S. biofuel policies in the soy oil market because it highly affects South America. So after the Inflation Reduction Act was announced, we saw a large gap between U.S. premiums and South American premiums. But that gap narrowed at the end of 2024 with all the uncertainty over biofuel policies and the new government. So at the end of 2024, that gap narrowed so much that U.S. started exporting oil again. So exported quite large volumes to India at the end of the year, I think towards the beginning of the year. But that at that point, it became competitive for other export destinations as well. From April, those prices started to decouple again. So we had updates on biofuel policies, and then we saw premiums move farther from each other from US to Argentina. Then recent volatility has led to a correlation break between CME and India CFR soy oil prices, because at the end, what we see, both FOB Argentina and CFR India, is we see that relationship between the largest soy oil exporter and the largest soy oil importer, and how demand and supply affect that relationship. While CME soy oil futures have largely been driven by U.S. biofuel policies. So the key takeaways here, I can't believe I'm still on time, but the key takeaways here is that soy oil was competitive here in India for only part of the year, but even so has gained share against bulk in India imports. Then, as we saw this week, that we had a change in scenario that made soy oil more competitive, we saw an increased demand from India for soy oil and a lot of trades both at origin and here in the CFR sides of things. Brazil's and U.S. soy oil supply is definitely pivoting inwards. Domestic consumption of soy oil for biofuels is increasing in both countries. But what we see in reality is that export levels are very dependent on confirmation of those mandates. Whenever we have a situation of uncertainty like we had this year, we see soy oil being exported, we see demand for both Brazilian and U.S. soy oil. Argentina is likely to increase its export dominance, particularly if we see a scenario of lower or even no export taxes in place. But it has already increased its export levels this year above around 14% from January to August. So we're likely to see if we see less export taxes, even the Argentinian soy oil even more competitive. And by last, are we seeing a structural decoupling between South American prices and CME soy oil futures? And can we think of something that is more reflective of that reality? We monitor premiums in South America, both Argentina and Brazil, and we see that the export and import dynamics are much more relevant in those markets. But my time is up. That's all the time I have. Thank you so much for receiving me here. I'm super available for answering questions. You can find me in the hallways or here. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here again.